great to see you today, Malcolm. You've helped us a lot with the fire ant issues over the last year.
Well, we've been in this actually since about 2016.
Yeah, well, you've been doing it longer than me, but well, you've been helping us in Sanford.
You've been a dynamo.
Yeah, well, you've been great helping us since we had the creek contamination, and then you came to Sanford and helped us do a town hall. I just want to say, we're very grateful that you've taken our questions to Senate estimates and you've come up with a fire ant policy for One Nation. But I just wanted to let you know as well, in the last week, despite all the work we've done, all the awareness we've raised and all the letters we've written, none of the protocols that the program followed, and they came onto my property while I was helping another person deal with fire ant poisoning of their own property, and while I was there they snuck onto my property. Snuck on with the gate was left open literally for 10 minutes, and within 10 minutes there were 4 or 5 of them swarming my front yard.
Do you think they watch you all the time?
I'm beginning to feel like that actually, because on that particular day I was helping Trevor Hold on his property.
He's doing marvellous work.
Yeah, and he had noticed that they were coming, so a group of us went there to give them support, and on that same day they targeted me and 6 other people that are associated with Trevor.
And your word targeted is no exaggeration, it's exactly what they're doing.
No coincidence with that.
Yeah.
He was advocating for those 5 or 6 people, and they were all attacked at the same time.
Yeah,
absolutely criminal.
And I've been working closely with Trevor over the last year, and I had no notice they were coming. Like, they normally give 48 hours notice. I had nothing. They actually told me they wouldn't be coming to my property because I've been sending them letters, and
they've been deceptive.
Yeah.
They told you one thing, and then when you thought they weren't coming, they came.
Yeah, they said we won't be coming back to your property. Your case has been elevated. I told them I have a medical certificate, and I do have a medical certificate saying they should not put bait on my property, and they didn't even ask me for that medical certificate. They just came on all my fruit trees.
So they ignored your health and safety, just bulldozed straight through, even though you'd notified them.
Yeah, I notified them. I phoned them twice. I've sent them many letters, emails, and everything was just ignored. And like by accident, my gate was left open like this much. I had a no trespass sign. I've told them I do not consent. I have a medical certificate, and within 10 minutes they all came on my property, and my husband just went out and told them to leave, and they did leave, but they said they were going to come back. But in that meeting,
and then they sprayed your property.
Yeah, they did all my fruit trees at the front.
So you're going to eat that?
Yeah, and my children play there. I have an 8-year-old. My dog is very sick and elderly as
Your
well.
dog?
So I now have to keep my dog off that part of my garden.
Pets are unsafe, kids are unsafe, adults are unsafe, fruit's unsafe, water's unsafe.
And I feel violated by what they've done, actually.
Well, when you were telling me this on the phone this morning, Sarah, you were going through a whole lot of feelings. From hopelessness, to helplessness, to anger, to fear, because a lot of these pesticides are toxic.
Yeah.
They're absolutely toxic.
Yeah.
And they're spraying them with it in contravention of the manufacturer's recommendations, and even against when the manufacturer says not to use it for certain purposes, they're using it for those purposes.
And they use pyriproxyfen on my garden, which actually states do not use preventatively.
Yep.
2 months ago, I paid for a professional pest controller to come to my property, who gave me a certificate to say this property is fire ant free. So I've tried.
And tell me again how many fire ant nests they found on your property?
None, and there's been none in my whole area.
This is happening right throughout Sanford. There's not a single fire ant nest in Sanford, but they're blasting the place with chemicals. I've seen the creek. No life in the creek now.
No.
And rainwater tanks.
Yeah.
With this stuff being sprayed on
people's roofs. And we caught them doing it again last week next to the river in Sanford. And there was an 80% chance of a lot of rain the following day, 35 mils of rain. And I filmed them putting the bait in the drainway, 8 meters from the creek, and the native ants were eating it. And then the next day I went back and it was filled with water, and all that water was flowing into South Pine River. So I feel that they are not respecting our properties, our environment,
your health,
our human rights to not have chemicals on my land.
And they're supposed to do this through consultation as well.
And the police are enforcing it.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're right there.
And some of the police are acting like bullies.
Yeah.
Trevor got injured.
Yeah, well,
and they drive through him.
I was helping Trevor. I was filming for Trevor on that day, and they opened up the gate and they ripped the skin all off his hand. He had 5 stitches in his hand, and then he asked them not to put it around his house, and a police officer tackled him to the ground and put handcuffs on him.
And the barrister in my office, he's come out and addressed some of your meetings, many places, South, Gold Coast, etc. And he's come out and made it very, very clear that they're acting in breach of the law and breach of the conditions of this pesticide use.
Yeah.
Very clear.
Safety data sheets that I have
Yeah.
for pyriproxyfen has hazard 351 suspected of causing cancer, and environment 3 mentions of environmentally hazardous substance, S-methoprene, and it has a safety data sheet not to be released into the environment, environmentally hazardous substance, and various other health conditions. And the
They're just giving you
biosecurity,
the big middle finger to all of that.
but their Biosecurity Act 2014, the Queensland one, has mention of unless you have a reasonable excuse. Suspected of causing cancer, would they let their 6-year-old children come out and play in the stuff after they've made it? But that's
So-
sort of,
So let me go through some of these things. Natalie Davis, a candidate in the seat of Wright, which has some fire ant, which has people complaining about the fire ant eradication program, and we've had it for many, many years in her electorate. So she said, can we put together a policy? And I first said, no, we don't need that because we're only lending a hand through social media, through legal advice, and through questions in Senate estimates in the Parliament, etc. And it's a state issue. And she said, no. Natalie's pretty determined. She's very, very strong. And she said, no, actually, these people need some help. So we've got a policy that's 2 pages long. So some of these are taken from listening to you guys and the people on the Gold Coast, and Currumbin, and Boona, and Gatton, and Caboolture. Landowners should have more control of the measures to manage and eradicate really important fire ants. Do you believe that?
Yeah, we should. I mean, areas didn't used to be allowed. They weren't allowed to treat their own nests. They had to wait for the government to come in.
Right.
And do it, so-
and the other thing, when you get into working with landholders, the landholders take more responsibility and they're more likely to be accountable. So secondly, landholders in Southeast Queensland need more control over what happens on their properties with regard to fire ants.
Yeah, for sure. Especially properties that don't even have fire ants.
Yep, and you can't use some of these chemicals for prevention. It would be more effective if authorities worked more closely with landholders. That's what you've been
100%.
begging them
Been
for.
asking, yeah. And the people in the scenic rim in Logan are being ignored right now, and they've got loads of fire ants, and they're desperate for help. And yet you've got 15 people swarming a farm in Gatton that has no fire ants, and the people in Logan are going, well, what about us?
Well, we'll come back to the history of fire ants in a minute. We're calling for the development of individual fire ant biosecurity plans approved by the landholder.
Yeah.
So you take responsibility for it. You're more likely to get it done than someone who's hired at a pretty high rate just for a temporary job.
Yeah.
They're not going to care
Yeah.
as much. Okay. Local landholders should be able to refuse government baiting and chemical programs provided they're able to demonstrate other effective control measures. And Trevor's done the work. You guys have done. I've got to admit to these guys have got the data. They've got the science behind them. You have, and there's another method that has no impact on the environment.
Yeah,
and that came from Florida, where they've had lots of years of experience with eradicating fire ants.
Exactly. I mean, I set up the group Fire Ant Treatment Alternatives because there are safer alternatives, you know, such as orange oil, diatomaceous earth. We have the hot water machine.
Oh, yeah.
If we had 20 hot water machines in this area in Logan, they could blast a load of nests.
And
you
it's
know.
been proven in Florida.
Yeah, it's been proven. Yeah.
Okay, next one. Landholders also have concerns about the dangerous nature of some chemicals being used by the National Fire Ant Eradication Program.
Yeah.
They're toxic.
Yeah, they are toxic, and they are poison, and they bioaccumulate, biomagnify, and we don't know the damage it's going to cause in years to come.
What we would do is give landholders more control over eradication efforts on their properties. That's what you want.
Yeah, that's what we want.
And that's what's needed for proper eradication.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, You're not opposed to eradicate fire ants, are you? You've never said that?
No, I don't believe they can eradicate them now. If they could, I would definitely support it. But I 100% believe the horse is bolted. These ants are too entrenched, and I don't think no amount of poisoning will ever get rid of them.
Okay, let's go through that data I mentioned a minute ago. When were fire ants first discovered and where?
2001 in the port of Brisbane.
So almost a quarter of a century later, where are they now?
Well, even when they found them, they think they had been here for 10 years.
Okay, so,
So mid-90s.
34 years.
Yeah.
34 years they've been here. They've been chasing this ant from one nest to now they're in northern New South Wales.
Yeah.
They're at the bottom of the range in Toowoomba. Some have even said they're at Oakey.
They're at Oakey.
Oh, they are at Oakey.
They
so
are.
they're in the they're in the Murray-Darling Basin.
80 nests found at the army base at Oakey.
And Caboolture.
They're at the Sunshine Coast, Yandina, North Arm. There's far south is Ballina and Byron
So
Bay.
this sounds like the eradication program worked wonderfully. It's expanded now.
Yeah.
How many fire ants nests have they got?
Oh, tens of thousands of them.
20-something thousand?
But in terms of the area covered, when they first found them in 2001, they were already on 35,000 hectares of land. The largest ever eradication has been only 9,000 hectares. The largest ever, I think it's 8,300. And now they're trying to eradicate them off of 880,000 hectares. That's over 2 million acres. And they're going to poison us non-stop 6 times.
So one of the things that I've asked various people at each of the forums I've been to, almost all of the forums, is, can you show me evidence of the damage? No one has. The closest I've come to that is one person said they made a few lambs uncomfortable. But in Florida, and in America, they're across the southern United States.
Yeah.
And the farmers there have learned to live with them. They're not killers of humans. They're not.
No.
Their fear has been magnified enormously for a political objective.
They mainly affect ground-dwelling birds and lizards and things like that live on the ground. But even then, you know, nature has a way of balancing itself out. And what we found is bull ants are actually natural predators of fire ants, but we're finding that the bull ants are eating the fire ant baits. So what they're doing is they're killing our native ants while they're trying to eradicate fire ants. And so when we realise the fire ants are still going to be here in 20 years' time, they're going to be worse because our native ants are there too.
Oh, I didn't think of that. Yeah. So our policy will support individual biosecurity plans for each property. Who knows your property better than you do?
Me. I know every ant nest on my property.
Okay. So you'd be the best one to know where the fire ants are. You know that there aren't any there at the moment, but they're still invading your space.
I'm more worried about the brown snake that lives in my retaining wall.
So our policy will support individual biosecurity plans for each property with the responsibility of compliance resting with the landowner. You prepared to take that responsibility?
I would, and I have already fulfilled my biosecurity obligation. I had my land surveyed. I paid money. I paid a couple of $100 for a guy to come out. And I said to him, do I have fire ants? He went, no, and he wrote me a certificate saying my land is free, and I plan to do that every 4 months.
And we've got commercial farmers now being affected because they can't send their hay to the flood-ravaged places in southwestern Queensland because of this, and yet they've got no fire ants.
I know, and also what people don't realise is because we're all now in this biosecurity zone, all our plant pots, soils, mulch, turf, hay, they're all being treated with bifenthrin as a preventative of fire ants. So when you bring on mulch to your property, it is treated with fire ant pesticides of bifenthrin. The hay is treated with bifenthrin.
Cows eat it.
Yeah, horses eating it, and we're getting people reporting that the horse manure is not as good as it used to be because the horses are now consuming these chemicals.
So the last part of our policy, just one sentence out of the last part. One Nation has always supported the right to farm. We've always known that farmers are the ones who know their land best. So what we've seen is a destruction of farming in this country, or the attempted destruction. It's ongoing.
Yeah.
What we've been told is a blatant lie that farmers don't give a shit about the environment. They don't care about the environment. Now, to me, what I've seen everywhere, whether it's in North Queensland, Central Queensland, the coast, or out west, is that the farmer's number one asset is the soil of his or her farm. They're not going to let that erode. Next thing is fertilizers are so expensive, they're not going to put excessive amounts on. Insecticides and pesticides are so expensive, they're not going to put excess on. They're loath to waste money, farmers, they're very sensible. But above all, it doesn't make sense, this claim that farmers won't protect the environment, because a farm in which the natural environment around it is destroyed will be less productive. It affects the whole farming productivity.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that the farmer's superannuation is his farm, or her farm. When they retire and they've had enough and they want to hand it to their kids, or they want to retire on the coast, they have to sell their farm.
Yeah.
They're not going to sell it for a decent price if it's turned into crap.
Yeah.
So the farmer, the landholder is the best person for protecting that land.
Yeah. We need to have that choice to decide how we want to manage our properties and our land and our soil and what affects our animals. And we've got enough evidence already to show this program is causing a lot of harm in humans, in animals, in birds, and we just want to be able to have some choice in.
So and what's going on here is yet another example of the theft of property rights. They can barge into your property.
Yeah.
We've got biosecurity laws that supposedly say that they can do that, but they're supposed to do it on conditions, and they're breaking their conditions.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. It's about stealing property rights, and once you destroy property rights, you destroy initiative, innovation, and you destroy responsibility. So that's what they're doing, and it's part of a global program. But the other thing is, a lot of these programs are about two things: wealth transfer and control. And it's I've heard, correct me if I'm wrong, I've heard that the person who has the contract for distributing these hideous pesticides is the same person who has the contract for supplying the pesticides.
Well, it's the government. DAF is the supplier, and DAF is the permit holder. So, but we also
so someone's making a lot of money out of this.
Yeah, because how are they the supplier as well as the permit holder?
So what they need to make that money, which is wealth transferred from the taxpayer through the state government to these people doing the job.
Yeah.
What they need then is control over people so they can do it.
Yeah.
So that they can't win you over with logic and data, because they're contradicting that.
Yeah.
So instead they intimidate you, and they use the taxpayer-funded state police to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, what we're seeing is it's like a huge employment program. They employ 500 low-paid ground crew, and I read somewhere that 60% or so of the funding goes on head office jobs. And we're talking at the moment 593 million funding till 2027. And the LNP has put in another 24 million into the eradicate, not into our area, but into where they do need it, which is fair enough. But they won't review the program's effectiveness until 2027, which is when that funding runs out. So I feel
we've got eradication failed utterly.
Yeah, it's
The
failed.
next step is containment.
Yeah.
That's failing.
Well, they haven't managed to contain them because they've just grown and grown and grown.
So what's the next one after that? The next step?
Asset management.
So
To minimise the impact of fire ants. Fire ants are going to be in our future forever. I will bet anyone $1 million that fire ants will be here in 10 years' time.
But you're happy to do your bit.
I'm happy to do my bit to minimise the impact fire ants have on our life. But
there you go, state government, federal government who funds this. Oh, the other thing is, an eradication program is funded by all the states, correct? And the feds.
And the feds. 90% of it's funded from outside of Queensland, yet Queensland runs the program.
But containment programs are funded only by the state of Queensland.
And councils.
Now do you see where the money's, why it's an eradication program, even though it's failing abysmally, because they can get more money. That's what it's all about. Wealth transfer from taxpayers to a few people, and control of the people in the process, and theft of property rights. Yet again, we see it in Australia.
Yeah, they are breaching their own legislation. The Fire Ant Act has mention of unless you have a reasonable excuse. The Police Powers and Responsibilities Act, under the section 791, part 2 in brackets, it has you must obey a police officer's direction unless you have a reasonable excuse. They would not listen to Trevor's reasonable excuse or anyone's reasonable excuse for that
Because
matter.
that just gets in their way. They're not obeying the law by the sound of what you're saying.
I've told them I have reasonable excuse. I have medical certificate. I don't have fire ants. And I've written to them. I've emailed them. I phoned them. I've given them my phone number. I've spoken to them in person, and they did not acknowledge my reasonable excuse. So now I'm talking with a human rights lawyer, and I'm going to...
And you've been talking with the barrister as well.
Yeah.
So can I just say thank you so much, because The eradication program has failed completely. It's all about money, wealth transfer and control, and you're standing up for farmers, you're standing up for property rights in this country, every Australian's property rights, because they can come onto your land if you don't watch it. So thank you so much for what you're doing. Marvellous.
Thank you,
Really
Mark.
is.
Thank you. Really appreciate you helping us.
Thank you to you for standing up on this.
Sure.